Gordon Strong joins me this week to discuss brewing in New Zealand, Brazil, and his new brewing system. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 156. This is BeerSmith Podcast number 156, and it's late September 2017. This week, Gordon Strong joins me to discuss his recent trips to Brazil, New Zealand, their beer styles and ingredients, and his new brewing system. Thank you to this week's sponsors, Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. They're running an amazing deal right now. Get 20% off your subscription when you use the code BeerSmith2017. Every issue of Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine is packed with articles for homebrewers and beer lovers, and you can read my new column called Ask the Experts there as well. Take advantage of their special deal when you use the offer code BeerSmith2017 at beerandbrewing.com. Again, that's beerandbrewing.com. And also the new BrewVision thermometer from Blickman Engineering. This interactive wireless digital thermometer connects right to your iPhone or iPad and lets you remotely monitor and record temperatures. You can download your recipes right from the BeerSmith cloud and set updates and alerts as you brew. Get the BrewVision Bluetooth thermometer today. Another great innovation from BlickmanEngineering.com. And finally, BeerSmith Mobile. The mobile version of BeerSmith is a perfect complement to our desktop brewing software. It includes all the tools you need to create recipes on the go, share them with friends, and act as a pocket brew timer. Check out BeerSmith Mobile at beersmith.com/mobile, or you can find it on the Google Play, iTunes, or Amazon app stores. And now let's jump into this week's episode. Today on the show, I welcome Gordon Strong. Gordon is president of the Beer Judge Certification Program. He's a Grandmaster Beer Judge and author of the books Brewing Better Beer and Modern Homebrew Recipes. Gordon, it is always nice to have you on the show. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me back, Brad.
Always my pleasure. Gordon's been on the show, I don't know how many times now, 5, 6, 7, something like that, right?
Yeah, whatever you got.
Yep. It's great to have you back on the show. What have you been up to lately? I understand you've been traveling a lot.
Yeah. This year's been an awful lot of travel. South America a few times, New Zealand, going back to New Zealand later. But yeah, I just actually got back from Brazil 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And have you had any time to brew in between, or no?
Actually, I have.
Good.
Actually, had our bud John Blickman came over to deliver my brewing system. Finally,
is that the one I saw? The one I saw at NHC?
Yes, the exact one.
Mm.
Instead of bringing it to my house, he brought it to Minnesota and showed everybody it, and then he brought it to my house.
That was very nice of him, huh?
Yeah. I told him he could do it as long as he hosed it off after people were drooling on it.
Well, I understand you've been traveling, so let's talk about your New Zealand trip first, maybe. How were things down under?
Oh, it was gorgeous there. New Zealand is actually quite lush. Beautiful pair of islands there. I was speaking at a homebrewers conference in Nelson. You might recognize Nelson from Nelson Sauvin hops. It's actually the center of their hop growing region there. You drive down the road and you stop at a place called Motueka, and they've got hop research going on there. It was quite an enjoyable trip. Took my wife, spent some extra time. It was great. A bunch of people there were interested in the BJCP, so we've got them studying for the exam and going back there in November to help administer their first test.
Did you get to sample some of the hops down there?
Oh yeah. We spent a day touring hops. We started sort of at the sort of reverse order. We went to the NZ hops, the packaging distribution place, to see how they process them, and then we went to a hop farm where they were actually harvesting hops at the time, and then we went to agricultural research station where they did research into the hops and working on the the new varieties that you always see coming out of New Zealand. So
and they have some pretty unique ones too, right?
Yeah. The Nelson Sauvin hop is really unique. It really does have a lot of the characteristics that the Sauvignon Blanc wines have, which are also from that area. Some of the ones there. I don't know if this is a complete coincidence or what, but they have this sort of tropical fruit, kind of a passion fruit kind of quality to them, but also like a white grapefruit and a lime zest and a little bit of kind of mineraliness to it. It's unusual. It's fairly strong. I wouldn't use it all by itself, and neither would the Kiwis. They would, but they would use it as an accent hop. It's quite distinctive. But a lot of the other hops have very interesting characteristics as well. A lot of these lime zest and tropical fruit flavors and such.
And those are becoming pretty popular in the IPA scene here, especially on the West Coast, right?
I would think so. I mean, I remember, what was it, 2011, the conference was in San Diego. There was a brewery out there, Alpine, and they had an IPA that featured Nelson hops exclusively. But certainly they export a lot of the hops to this country, so we can certainly get a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. I understand while you were over there, you also got introduced to a style called New Zealand Pilsner. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was actually kind of my discovery of the trip, I think. The people wanted to tell me about this style they had, and I'm like, okay, fine. It's a lot of people say, oh, you should try our pale ale. It's like really unique, and it just tastes like everybody else's pale ale. Mm-hmm. But the Pilsner was a little different. Yes, it featured the New Zealand hops I talked about, the Nelson Sauvin and Motueka, Riwaka, Rakau, things like that. Features those hops, but I guess it's kind of loosely modeled on a German Pilsner, but it's not nearly as sharp. It's not nearly as crisp. It has kind of a soft finish and a little bit less bitterness. Really kind of plays up the tropical hops and the flavor and aroma. Yeah, I found most of them to be around 30 IBUs or so. So I think the closest thing it would be to me is, if you imagine a Kolsch made with sort of tropical hops and like more of a late hop finish, less of a really sort of sharp biting Pilsner and more of a softer finish, a little bit more body, but a fairly neutral malt. But I really liked how drinkable it was, and I think those New Zealand hops, they're nice to have in a more approachable beer, something that's 5% and 30 BUs, something you can have several pints of, not some trying to knock your socks off with a double IPA that's loaded up with those hops.
So maybe closer to a session beer then, I guess. With the New Zealand hops?
Yeah, kind of session for us. I mean, in the UK, that would be a strong beer, but just kind of, the term I used in my book for these kind of beers were kind of everyday beers, just, something you could grab and drink.
Lawnmower beer? Not quite. Huh?
Well, yeah, in New Zealand, the lawnmower is called a sheep. So,
would you have any advice for somebody that wanted to brew this particular style?
Well, I wrote about it in the July-August issue of BYO. I made it recently. I'm drinking it right now. So
he's holding up a pint here for those of you watching on video.
Yep, beer.
Ooh, beer.
So
he's drinking now. So give me a second. So you were saying?
Yeah, I was saying. that's a great beer to brew. Actually, when I was tasting the malt profile of several of the commercial examples there, that the brewers and people interested in BJCP set up a tasting for me one night. They brought out like 8 of these, and I got to try them and see which ones were fresh and which ones, see what sort of similar profile they had, so I could actually take notes and help work up a style description. They had a draft one that I started with, but I expanded it based on the tasting notes I had. The thing that, from a formulation standpoint, I think it can be a fairly simple grist. It didn't taste to me like it was all German Pilsner malt. So they were using sort of domestic malts, and they can get German malts as well. But for me to get the flavor profile that they had, I basically split German Pilsner and American two-row. So I used the American two-row to kind of dilute the flavor of the German Pils, because it didn't taste super Pils like. It was more of a neutral malt, but it still had some of that lightly corny, a little bit sweet kind of flavor that you can get from the German Pilsner malts.
So kind of a mix between Pilsner. You said 50-50 mix of Pilsner and Pale Ale? Is that what you did?
No, just two-row.
Oh, two-row, okay.
Yeah, just neutral base malt.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I did, and I got contacted by this woman I met there who worked for a New Zealand maltster and called Gladfield. And she said, would you like to try some of our malt? I said, well, is it used in some of these beers? Because they tasted a little bit more like Czech Pils to me. They had like a much more toasty malt base to them, bready, toasty. It tasted a little bit like a pale ale kind of malt, like a English pale ale kind of base malt. She says, no. We've got this new malt coming out, and I can get you a sample of like batch number 1 of it. I'm like, oh, that's great, sure. So she sent me some of that, and that's what I made.
The Pilsner you're drinking with, yeah.
Yeah, the Pilsner I'm drinking with. This was 100% Gladfield German Pilsner malt. So the names are very similar. The malt they made before is called Pilsner, and this one's called German Pilsner. And so I'm like, okay, if I want to evaluate the malt, I'm just going to use nothing but that malt. And it really did nail the flavor profile. It's like a diluted Pilsner malt from Germany, which is exactly what I want.
Is Gladfeld actually German, or is it New Zealand?
No, it's New Zealand. It's New Zealand.
So I assume, is a malt also grown in New Zealand then?
Yes.
Oh, it is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And I don't know how widely they export. In most of these countries that I go to that have brewing, craft brewing, you can almost always find some barley being produced and local maltsters. They may not always have all the specialty malts, but they usually have base malts. But I found it interesting that they were trying to come out with a base malt specifically for this style of beer. They said they had been getting requests from the commercial brewers there that their malts didn't have exactly the right flavor they were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever conversation that was, I basically just described, here's what I would like it to taste like. And she goes, that's exactly what we did. Here, try this.
Oh, wow. So which hops? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just said I was impressed that that it came out sort of dead on target. When I first had tried making this beer, I did the German Pils and US two-row. It's a very similar flavor. So it's it's something that might not be that far off from like a blonde ale or golden ale that you might get in the States, as far as base malt's concerned.
And then what hops did you end up using for this one?
Yeah, so I actually brought back some hops from New Zealand. They're hops that we can get here, but, they were just packaging up there, so I just couldn't resist. So most of it is Rockow, which they describe as the phrase they use is whole orchard. So it has a lot of different fruit flavors in it. And then I used some Nelson Sauvignon hops as an accent.
Mm-hmm. You use that in the whirlpool or something, maybe?
Yeah, I have to check what I.
That's okay. It's just I
used it at 10 minutes.
Okay, so just at the end, yeah.
Yeah, because this beer shouldn't be dry hopped. It's kind of a sharper flavor than they're really looking for there. It's okay to have like a lot of late hops,
mm-hmm.
but they're not trying to have it blow you away with how many hops they used. There's some restraint here, and that's kind of why it reminds me of Kolsch. It's just so nicely well balanced and drinkable. You just kind of just be drinking this and not needing to concentrate so much on it. So I found that very enjoyable. And from a yeast standpoint, they mostly have dry yeast there. So,
mm-hmm.
I said, okay, if it's a Pilsner, what kind of lager yeast do you use? So they mentioned the W3470 yeast, which I've actually had a fair amount of luck with. I think I'd have no problem using that instead of liquid lager yeast when I want to use that particular strain.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of them also said that they did it as sort of a cool ale, so they did US-05, and that's what I did in this batch. Actually, since I made this batch on the big Blickman system I got, I got this sort of amazing efficiency. Since it was the first time I was using it, I wasn't sure how much I was going to get, and it was somewhere around 90%. So I wound up making a 15-gallon batch, so I was able to split it between US-05, W3470, and I had a package of the White Labs WLP 830 laying around, which is it's the same yeast as the 3470.
So did you break it into 3 carboys or something?
Yep.
Yep.
So a 15-gallon batch into 3, 6 or 6.5 gallon carboys, and let it rip. So I kegged off the ale, and the 2 lagers are still lagering away. Because one of the things the New Zealanders mentioned is they don't want a lot of sulfur in the beer, so they don't want a lot of mineral content in the water. And they also, if they do lager it, they don't want it served too young and you get the yeasty, sulfury flavors.
Sure.
So, they think the sulfur clashes, and I'm not a fan of that either. And that's one of the reasons why I like the 3470 strain. It doesn't throw a lot of sulfur, and if you lager it, it does get super smooth. So I'm looking forward to trying that batch in a couple of weeks.
Nice. Well,
hopefully some of this ale left.
Yeah.
It's just drinking really good right now.
You get a nice drinkable beer. It doesn't last long, huh?
Nope.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to actually move on. I know you wanted to say some words about your new brewing system. You stepped up. Let's talk about what you had before first, maybe. I know you brew a lot, so. Oh,
yeah. So, the brewing system I had was half-barrel, 3-vessel, gas-fired. I don't even know the company's still in business. Pico Brewing Systems, not a Pico Brew, but a Pico.
Yeah, I was going to say not the current Pico Brew, right?
No. These people were like in Ypsilanti, Michigan, and it was nice. I mean, I liked it. It worked really well. But I was brewing outdoors, and I got tired of days where I'd get rained out, or if it was too close to freezing.
Hurricanes can screw you up too, right?
I don't get many of those in Ohio, but yeah. So I kind of wanted to move indoors, and so like a year ago at the NHC, I talked to Blickman. I'm like, hey, I'm thinking of replacing the system I've had forever, because I probably got it in the late 90s. I mean, it's all I've been using for all those years. It served me well. But I'm like, so, I know there's been a lot of improvements, and what are you looking at? And he says, have you thought about electric? Like, no. I don't know what's involved in that. I figured it would be slow or something. He's like, no. You run 240 to it, and the thing's like really fast.
Yeah, they are.
I was amazed. I had, last summer I went to New York City, and that weekend was 100 degrees. It was awful. Great people, but they wanted me to do this brewing demonstration at a homebrew store. I'm like, oh God, I'm just gonna sweat to death here. But no, it was inside. It was air conditioned, and they had an electric brewing system. I'm like standing right next to this thing, and you couldn't feel. I'm so used to like feeling the heat from a burner. Yeah. You don't feel the heat from the burner. You feel like some heat from the pot, but the burners, there aren't burners, so you really just don't get any of that. It's awesome.
Yeah, we had John on a couple months ago, and we were talking about going electric and some of the lessons learned from going electric. And I went to an electric system as well last I think it was November, and I love the thing. It's been great. I could brew all winter. I didn't have any problems.
Yeah, I stuck it in my garage, so I think I can brew 3 seasons. I mean, I can even brew in the summer if I want. Well, I did. I mean, I brewed that 15 gallons of New Zealand Pilsner in the middle of July. But the problem I have in brewing this summer is the groundwater is so warm. I have to like pre-chill my water in order to get the temperature down. And even then, sometimes I just like, instead of putting it directly into a fermenter, I'll put the beer into a carboy and stick that in the fridge, and come back the next day when it's cooled off, and then put it into a fermenter and pitch. Mm-hmm. But I don't really like letting the beer sit around for a day before I pitch yeast. I'm kind of paranoid about getting the yeast in there as fast as I can.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are you, what do you have other, what did you end up brewing on the system first? I know you just got it, a couple months ago?
Yeah, it's this New Zealand Pilsner.
So that was your first beer that you brewed on it?
Yeah, actually, John came over and set up the system and showed me how to use it, and we brewed together. He spent the night and hung out with me and the family, and it was a fun time. He doesn't live that far from me, so that was a nice little visit.
So you got a 3-vessel system with 2 pumps. Do you have any advice for people looking to move into maybe something? Maybe they got a 5-gallon system looking to go to a 10-gallon system, and start adding recirculating mash system and things like that.
Yeah, I mean before. So I had the 15-gallon system, and I had two pumps there as well. So it was just all manual. I mean, I could draw from under the false bottom and then pump on top of the mash, and then if I lit the burner under the mash tun, I had in effect a recirculating mash, and that's how I always did all my steps. And how I mashed out and everything. So it's more automated here on the Blickman system, and I just kind of punch in the number I want it to be, and like Captain Picard, make it so, and off it goes. So I was very impressed with that. So the system I have now, this new one, it's a 15-gallon hot liquor tank and a 15-gallon mash tun and a 20-gallon kettle. So that's actually kind of nice, because before you can't really get 15 gallons out of a half-barrel system. You're just going to pull over. Yeah. So, I mean, about the most I could do was 12 or 13. 13 was kind of pushing it. So now I was able to get like a full 15 out of it, and that was kind of nice. So that will, as long as I want to make more quantity of the same beer, that's fine. For the longest time, I was testing recipes for the recipe book, so I was just making 1 keg's worth. So I was just brewing. I was brewing an awful lot, but I was brewing sort of smaller batches instead of like a more efficient 10-gallon batch. So I really like this electric system. I mean, indoors. So that's certainly nice because it takes the weather out of the equation, and since it's not so hot or so noisy, you can just sit there and just run it. So I was really pleased with how smooth the electric system worked, and I'll have to do a couple more batches to see if I've continued to get this kind of efficiency, or if it just was a product of me using nothing but Pilsner malt in this last batch. But 90% is amazing.
Yeah, that's great.
70% or something in my old system. So I was very impressed with this new thing, and the build quality is just stunning. I mean, this thing's going to last a couple hundred years, I think.
Yeah, I was thinking I could use the pots as a bullet shield or something. The things are so thick, it's insane. I've got a Blickman system as well. I got the Brew Easy system, which is a two-tier system. But yeah, the pots are so thick. They're stainless steel. Amazing.
Yeah, that's the kind of the brew in a bag kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it's not that simple. But yeah, he
well, for me it was nice because it's compact and I could put it in the basement. So doesn't take up much space.
Yeah. The only reason I stayed with the 3-vessel system is that's how I've always brewed. So right. I didn't want to redo everything. I thought it would give me more flexibility to brew various different things if I had more control over all the different components. And sure enough, I mean, he kind of assumed that for example, that when you run in the hot liquor from the hot liquor tank when you're mashing, that you're just putting it on the top. And I'm like, well, I like to underlet it because I brew myself, and when you do it that way, it's a lot easier to stir. And he hadn't really thought about that. So we talked about how the routing of things went, and we were able to sort of quickly say, oh, well, you just move this to here and move this there, and off you go. So
are you using his new pumps as well?
Yeah. I mean, actually, that's kind of why it took me so long to get the system. Is every time I thought it was about done, he's like, "Oh, I got this new thing coming out. You're really going to like it. You really need to wait for it." I'm like, "Dude, it's just a pump." He goes, "No. I fixed it." And yeah, I mean, you've been to these BYO boot camps, and Blickman has a system there, and I'm using it. And one of the things I like to tell people is like, we're standing there getting ready to start, and I'm talking to people, and I'm like, oh, by the way, we've already started. The pumps are on. Yeah. And like people would like walk over, and they'd go and they'd like put their hand on it just to. They thought I was kidding them. It's like, no, put your hand on it. You can feel it vibrate.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, we're talking about the new Riptide pump that Blickman put out, which is an enclosed pump, so it's very, very quiet. I mean, just whisper quiet, literally.
Yeah, and he just designed the head. It's still the old reliable March pump that everybody loves. I had those for years, and they're tanks, but they were loud, and that annoyed me, and they weren't self-priming, and so he built all these. He listened to homebrewers. It's like, here's all these things that annoy me about pumps, and I'm going to fix it. Yeah. So and they look really cool.
Okay.
And then he had this metal table. Like, it's just a table, dude. It's like, no. It's got all these features. You're gonna like it. So
yeah, though the system you got is a beautiful stainless steel metal table that all three of the vessels sit on, right?
Yeah, it does, and it's got a nice lip, so if there's spills, they don't like go all over the place, and it's got some power to it, and it's just like all the stuff he does. It's all very thoughtful. It's all just quality. And, it rolls around nicely, and So I'm still checking out some of the advanced features of the controllers that he has, because he's like, well, you hook a computer into it, and then like you take your BeerSmith recipe and you like hook it in there and you download it, and it like, you can tell it all the steps you want, and it'll just do it. Like, okay.
I haven't even gotten into that yet, but I know he does have some of those features built in if you mess around with it. So
yeah, it's pretty sweet.
We probably given John enough free advertising for today. Let's talk about Let's talk about
my windows now.
I mean, I actually do enjoy brewing on his equipment, and of course he's been a sponsor of the show for a long time too. But I wanted to go on to your trip to Brazil. That was your most recent trip, right?
Yeah. I was in Florianopolis, which is on the coast, south of Sao Paulo.
Yeah, I think I did the same trip a couple of years back. It was there's a small group down there that does a regional homebrew a conference, I think.
Yeah. It was kind of their state championship.
Yep.
So really, really, really good people down there. And
Ronaldo, I think, was one of them. Yeah.
Ronaldo drove me around, and was a great host.
Yeah.
But it was a really kind of fast trip because I've been doing a lot of travel and I didn't have a lot of extra time.
Yeah.
And I've been to Brazil before, but not that town. I wish I would have stayed longer, so I guess I'll just have to go back. But yeah, we're judging down there, and they get around to Best of Show, and they hand me the style description. It's in Portuguese, but I don't really speak Portuguese, but I know a fair amount of Spanish, and maybe 80% of the words are the same once you understand the spelling differences. So I could kind of make out what they were talking about. It was the style was called Catarina Sour. And the Catarina is from the name of their state, Santa Catarina. Mm-hmm. And they kind of explained it to me. It's like it's around a 5% Berliner Weiss type beer, so it's got a clean lactic sourness, but it's stronger than a Berliner Weiss, and it generally has fruit in it. Well, it always has fruit in it, but it's generally tropical fruit. So the beer that we picked for Best of Show was this Catarina Sour. It was clearly the best beer on the table, and they used guava as the fruit.
Interesting. And did the guava come through very well? Because a lot of tropical fruits, I don't get a tremendous amount of flavor out when I try and brew with them, anyways.
Yeah. I've got to figure out what exactly the guy did, because I decided I need to look into guava, not the juice or not the paste, to see if I could get my hands on the fruit. And I went to an Asian market locally, and spend $5 on one piece of fruit, but it's this sort of gnarly light green looking thing with a pale flesh, and it tastes kind of like a cross between passion fruit and pear, if I had to describe it. But the beer that I had a very strong passion fruit flavor, which is sort of one of my favorite tropical fruits. And it just went so well. It was so refreshing, but it wasn't like a 3% beer. It was a 5% beer. So it had a little bit more presence to it, and the fruit really stood up, and the sourness wasn't ripping your lips off. It was just really, really kind of it's kind of like one of these fancy lemonades you get at like the Cheesecake Factory or something. They'll give you like an iced tea or a lemonade with tropical fruit in it or something, and it tastes really interesting, really good. So
I know when we were down there around Florianopolis, there are several German towns where most of the people speak German, and they have a very strong German brewing tradition. I assume maybe one of those breweries did the beer, or one of the locals did the beer.
I really don't know the origin, but
don't know.
I mean, I've been to some of those towns, like Blumenau.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this little Bavarian village dropped in the middle of a rice paddy. It looked like a cross between Vietnam and Bavaria. But that was actually the first place in South America I went in 2011.
Yeah.
So I've been back to Brazil, but maybe 5 or 6 times since then. But first time actually to Florianopolis. But it was it's right on the water. It's beautiful. It's kind of the middle of winter for them, but that just meant it was 70. So it was. I had a good time there.
Did you run into any other innovative beer styles while you were down there?
Not really. I found it interesting to see. Brazil is kind of like Hawaii. It's just full of tropical fruit, and a lot of things that you've never heard of. Sometimes, they come up with a name, and like passion fruit is maracuja, and there's just kind of a direct translation, and then these other things they give you, like, okay, well, what's the name of it? Like, I don't know what it is in English. I don't even know if there is a word in English. It's just this fruit from the jungle here, and it tastes like a cross between chocolate and bananas, or something like that. Is something really obscure. So oftentimes I try to judge fruit beers, or one time I judged wood-aged beers because they have this. Did you have any of the booze they have down there? The cachaça.
I don't think I did. No, we mostly had beer when I was there.
Yeah, I mean, cachaça is kind of like rum, except rum is made from molasses, and cachaça is made from the sugarcane juice. So it's not like a byproduct of making, sugar. It's just it's the straight ingredient. But it kind of drinks a little like rum. But they have some that are aged, and they age it in this wood from down there. The wood's called umburana, and it has this cinnamon-like flavor. It's very, very interesting. So when I had some wood-aged beers, I'm like, did they say they added cinnamon? They're like, no, that's the wood.
Oh,
so,
wow.
Yeah, so it's you think you've judged a lot, and then but then when you try things with these sort of local ingredients, it's a lot more fun. So the wood-aged beers, the fruit beers, those kind of things down there. But really, this Catarina Sour was the only thing that I saw that was really a new style. But I commend the people because they actually did a BJCP style write-up for it. I'm waiting for them to translate it and send it to me. I'll probably write about it in a future Brew Your Own column on styles. That's where I tend to write about things that I discover. So. So I'm interested in trying it. The people down there, they had kind of a reception for judges and brewers, and I gave a talk down there the first night I was down there. And this woman comes up to me and is like, "Oh, try this beer. It's a porter. Try." I'm like, "Oh, that's pretty good." She's like, "Yeah, that's your recipe."
Oh,
I'm
nice.
Like, which one? Which one?
From your book, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. From that book.
Modern homebrew recipes. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's several English porter recipes in there, and she did the robust English porter, I think it was called, and but she'd first given it to me that she had done it with American yeast. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. And then she gives me this other one. I'm like, wow, that's really good. She goes, well, this one uses English yeast. I'm like, well, you really should make the recipe the way I had it written. Try that. Well, it turns out that she was starting up a yeast business down there. So she On the day I was leaving in the morning, the flight's in the afternoon. In the morning, I went down and I toured her lab. So she's putting together liquid yeasts. So I thought that was pretty cool. And she's like, here, take a sample or something with you. And she gave me this Brettanomyces that was isolated in Brazil. So I have no idea what this is going to be like, but I think I'll try it as a primary fermentation strain and see what it tastes like. But just kind of a different variety. She gave me a couple of strains of lacto as well. And I'm like, well, that's great. This will make it a whole lot easier for me to make a Catarina sour if I can get my hands on some tropical fruit. If I find out what form they used, to probably just use some form of juice. But that was fun to see. You've traveled around these places. I think one of the indicators that the craft market is sort of starting to take off is you start seeing these sort of specialty suppliers. I mean, anybody with a brewing industry is going to have maltsters that make base grain. But when you see people start up businesses where they're focusing on making the specialty malts, or if you see yeast suppliers that want to make liquid yeast and supply it to brewers, or somebody's trying to research and develop local hops. So, I mean, I saw the malt and I saw the yeast in Brazil, but I didn't see the hop research. I think there the South Americans can really take a page from the New Zealanders.
Well, unfortunately, as I understand it, the climate in Brazil doesn't lend itself to growing hops. I think most of it's grown farther south in Argentina, I believe. So
yeah,
that's what I understood, anyways, when I was down there.
But they can still, some country can still do the research. A lot of the hops are grown in Patagonia, which is the southern part of South America. It's Argentina and Chile. Yeah. But there might be some places in Brazil that have the right climate, but it's kind of a hot country. So there could be some challenges there, but it would be interesting to see if there's some places that have the microclimates, maybe some place that's hilly or more elevation or something. Certainly wouldn't grow them in the Amazon, but no. Just get your fruit there.
Well, when I was down there a few years ago, they had a small but a pretty strong emerging homebrew and craft beer culture. Has that expanded quite a bit in the last couple of years? And like I said, the very first trip I made to South America was Brazil, and this last one. But I've been to Argentina, I've been to Chile, I've been to Uruguay, and I've met people from several of the other countries down there. I'm sure I'll get to Peru and Paraguay soon. I actually had to turn down a trip to Peru because I was going to be in New Zealand. Life is rough, huh?
Yeah, I know. First world problems.
Yeah.
Don't you want to see Machu Picchu? Like, of course I do, but I'm going to be on a plane to New Zealand.
Yeah.
So I had to take a rain check on that one. The beer gets better every time I go down there. So the cool thing is if you go down there that there's often a lot of overlap between home brewers and professional brewers. There's not this strict dividing line like we have in the States. And the people I run into tend to speak English because a lot of the primary references they look for are written in English. So, that kind of makes it useful to communicate. But they pay attention. When they ask for advice and you help them out, and you come back the next time and see that they actually made improvements, that just kind of makes the whole thing worthwhile. I love seeing people improve their beer because they're applying the lessons that they're taught. So they're smart people, they're creative people. They want to make these interesting beers. They're still behind us. They're still behind us in the States, but I think they're advancing at a steeper rate than we are. So I'm not sure how long it'll take for them to fully catch up, and it varies country by country. But it's great to see that sort of craft beer culture take off in these places.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've seen strong growth particularly in South America the last couple of years. I know a lot of stuff going on there, so that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if there's people from there who will be watching this, or people from New Zealand. I mean, a lot of these places are very, very strongly into the the internet-based learning, and this kind of show I think helps them out a lot.
Oh yeah, I've got thousands of subscribers in South America. I know for a fact, so it's great. And they're using the software too. Somebody translated it into Portuguese and Spanish, so that's available as well.
Yeah, just like we do in the BJCP, we give examples of those languages, and the people down there help us. So they're our partners as well.
Well, Gordon, I think we've covered most of what we had on the agenda. Is there anything else you wanted to add here at the end? Closing thoughts, maybe? Like I said, I've been doing a lot of travel. I've still got more to go. I'll be at the GABF judging again. If anybody is there, it's usually easiest to find me on the session that's the HA members session on Saturday afternoon. It'll just be you and 50,000 of your closest friends, right?
Yeah, but usually I'll be signing books then. So I'll probably have like a hour slot sometime where I'll be hanging out in the bookstore. So if somebody wants to track me down there and have a beer with me. And
I should probably mention your books. I'll throw up the one I have here. It's Modern Homebrew Recipes. That was your most recent one.
Yep.
And then your other book, let's see, I'll pull it up here while you're talking.
There's a quiz. Brewing
Better Beer, Master Lessons for Advanced Homebrewers there.
Yeah. So the cool thing about going to these other countries is I've kind of learned the trick is to take an extra suitcase, pack it full of books, then I can sell the books while I'm there, and then I've got room for all the beer that people give me, or the wines if I'm in a country that has good wine, or local booze or something to so I take down paper and I bring back bottles. So that works really well for me. So I love those trips.
Sounds like a pretty good trade to me, really.
Yeah, indeed. And I'll be going back to Chile, Santiago, Chile in October. I judge in the commercial competition there, and I'll be in Toronto for competition in November, and then back to New Zealand over Thanksgiving to do a BJCP exam.
Aren't you going to Indianapolis with me? I think it's early November, right? November 3rd, 4th, something like that.
Oh yeah, thanks.
BYO event. BYO event, right?
Yeah, and it's probably a good time for that to be mentioned, because I think registration will be open, but I think they offer these early bird discounts. So
yeah, Brew Your Own magazine. I think it's BYO, right?
Yeah, BYO, Brew Your Own. They call it a beer boot camp, and it's 2 days of, you get to take all day classes and hang out with people like me and you and Michael Tonsmeyer, some other folks who happen to be there. That
the evil John Blickman too. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Blickman will be there. I don't know that he gives classes. He just stands around to make sure I don't break his equipment.
That's about it. Yeah.
But I do a class on advanced all grain brewing, and we get to use the Blickman system. So it's hands-on, it's technical, theory, and then hands-on practical all mixed together. And the thing I like about that is it's kind of a small format. It's 30 or 35 people. So people that have individual questions can ask them, and a lot of brewing is paying attention to things that look the right way.
Yep,
So,
and I'm doing a session there on beer recipe design, and we'll be doing a lot of ingredient work there as well. So should be a lot of
yeah,
fun.
it's really cool to get in and if somebody says, well, how many quarts per pound, of water to use with your mash? I'm like, well, I don't really measure it. I do it until it looks like this, and then show them the consistency. And it's really kind of hard to describe that. But
Yeah.
so when you can have that kind of hands-on discussion, and then and to be able to use a slick system like that Blickman provides.
Yeah.
So do you use his system as well in your talk, or
No? During my talk, we typically do a lot of sampling. So we do a lot of beer sampling and ingredient sampling, and kind of making the connection between the two is the main focus of it. So.
Yeah, there's always this big hands-on interactive piece, and the classes go like 6 hours or something all day.
Yeah, it's an all-day session, which is great because folks get to ask questions and so on. And there's actually time to sit down and answer, go into detail on a lot of things that you would not normally be able to go into detail on. So that's a great event.
And they had these evening events, and there's a lot more interaction. Last time they had,
it's a lot of fun.
Sort of question and answer sessions, and just got to have us talk. And they usually have, they usually hold it in some beer-friendly location. We were in Santa Rosa, California, and they had Russian River bring in a bunch of their stuff.
And they were within easy walking distance as well, which was great. We could walk over to the tasting room. Yep,
didn't have to worry about driving. So that was quite enjoyable.
Yep.
So that's the 3rd and the 4th of November in Indianapolis. So that's a nice 2-hour drive for me. Are you going to fly, or are you going to drive like you usually do?
I have not decided yet. I'm still still not sure. It's on the edge of my driving zone. It's like about an 8 or 9 hour drive, I think.
Yeah, you're in the DC area, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah. So it's a good distance from here.
It's probably 8 hours to me, and then another 2 on top of that.
It could very well be. I haven't looked into it in detail, but I'm sure it'll be a great event. So I'm looking forward to it.
Out there. Yeah. It's however you get there.
Yeah. Well, Gordon, thank you very much for coming on the show and chatting with us again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on, and thanks for indulging me in just kind of talking about a random collection of topics. When you go around to a lot of different places, it's fun to talk about the things that are new and interesting and strike your fancy. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of interesting how a lot of the things I wanted to talk about can kind of weave together in a story. But if I had one thing to leave people with is, try New Zealand Pilsner. There's a recipe of mine in July, August 2017 BYO magazine. Mm-hmm. Wrote about the style, so it's dead simple to make, and just a really nice everyday kind of beer to have on tap. I think this is going to be my new house beer for at least a while. Nice.
Well, again, my guest today was Gordon Strong. Gordon is the president of the Beer Judge Certification Program. He's also its highest-ranking Grandmaster Beer Judge. Gordon is the author of the books Brewing Better Beer and Modern Homebrew Recipes. And Gordon, it was a great pleasure having you on the show. Thanks again.
Always great to be with you, Brad.
Well, a big thank you to Gordon Strong for joining me this week. Thanks also to Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine. Every issue is packed with great information for homebrewers and craft beer fans. Take advantage of their fantastic sale and get 20% off when you use the offer code BeerSmith2017 at beerandbrewing.com. And also Blickman Engineering, creators of the innovative new BrewVision wireless thermometer. Remotely monitor your brewing system from your iPhone or iPad, record data, set alerts, and grab recipes directly from the BeerSmith cloud. The BrewVision thermometer, another great innovation from BlickmanEngineering.com. And finally, BeerSmith Mobile. The mobile version of BeerSmith is a perfect complement to our desktop brewing software. Check out BeerSmith Mobile at beersmith.com/mobile or on Google Play, iTunes, or the Amazon app stores. Thank you for listening. I hope you have a great brewing week.